Welcome to Civilian Carry Radio, a proud member of the Firearms Radio Network. This show is brought to you by our sponsors tonight, Big Tex Outdoors, FPF Training, and Ammo.com. Big Tex Outdoors mainly focused is high-speed, quality, tactical EDC gear. They offer 100% risk-free shopping. That means if you change your mind for any reason, they will refund your purchase price. Somebody needs to do. Thank you. You guys are destroying the show intro. Hello. Thank you. All right, let's try this again, folks. Oh, somebody's still going. Someone needs to mute Ashton. But folks, this is Ashton Ray, 360 Performance, who has not muted his YouTube channel, I think. Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, folks. Let's try a redo. Welcome to Civilian Carry Radio, a proud member of the Firearms Radio Network. This show is brought to you by our sponsor tonight, Big Tex Outdoors, FPF Training, and Ammo.com. Big Tex Outdoors' main focus is high-quality tactical EDC gear. They offer 100% risk-free shopping. That means if you change your mind for any reason, they will refund the full purchase price, shipping cost, and pay for the return shipping. So total risk-free shopping. On top of that, most of their orders ship in 24 hours or less. Some of their items ship for as little as $1.99. They're an FFL Class 3 SOT, and they sell suppressors, SBR, and NFA items. Check out their website, bigtexoutdoors.com. Use the code CCRadio for a 15% discount at checkout. Again, CC Radio, 15% checkout. Remember, risk-free shopping. FPF training is for citizens seeking to become capable self-defenders who require that their mindset be reinforced with the knowledge to enable informed decision-making, skills necessary to undertake decisive action while under stress. To fulfill this requirement, our sponsor, FPF Training, offers concealed and carried advanced skills and tactics consisting of extensive coursework, practical application, range time that is focused on a host of skills designed to enable ordinary people to prepare themselves for the armed lifestyle and criminal violence. FPF Training is based in Culpeper, Virginia, and is traveling to select ranges around the country. To attend a course or to host a class, go to fpftraining.com. Please stay tuned after this live video broadcast for an awesome video feature from FPF Training called FPF Training's Concealed and Carry Advanced Skills and Tactics. Ammo.com is offering you, our listeners, viewers, a $20 discount off any order over $200. On top of that, they donate 1% of every sale to a pro-freedom organization such as Home for the Troops and United Service Organizations, all at no extra cost to you, the customer. They take that 1% expense, not you. Head over to ammo.com/CCR. Again, folks, ammo.com/CCR. Thank you. Our goal and focus of this podcast is to spread our message to everyday people the importance of the Second Amendment, firearm safety, education, training, mindset. Remember, you and only you are responsible for your safety and protection of yourself and your loved ones. Our mission statement: gun ownership is your right, safety and education are your responsibility. I'm your host and producer, Baraka James, along with my co-host, Alan Sams. Good evening, Alan. How are you?
Great. How's it going?
Doing well now that we got all those technical difficulties out of the way. And our first co-host this evening is Mr. Lee Weems. Leo, for those who don't know what Leo is, a law enforcement officer, chief deputy, and owner of First Person Safety. Good evening, Lee. How are you?
Good evening, Barack. I'm doing fine. It's good to be here.
Awesome, man. Thank you. And we're happy to have you here. And our second co-host tonight is Mr. Ashton Ray, U.S. Navy vet and owner of 360 Performance Shooting. Good evening, Ashton. How are you? And more technical difficulties.
Muted.
Performance. We are listener-funded radio, and you, the listeners and viewers, make this program possible. You can contribute to the show via Patreon for as little as $1 per episode or as much as you like by going to patreon.com and search for CC Radio. That's like $4 a month. You can check out the link here in our show notes. And again, folks, that just goes to paying for internet bills. We will be actually getting some T-shirts made. And if you catch Alan and I at the NRA annual meeting, while supplies last, you will score yourself a CCR T-shirt. We will be premiering them there. A huge shout out to our $10 per show Patreon pledge, Mark B. Our $5 per show Patreon pledges, Christopher D., Rob J., CJ, James W., Russ A., Ira S., Rob C., and Michael G. We thank you so much for your continued support. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio and or their employees. Viewer discretion is advised, especially on live shows. Tonight's guest is Mr. Carl Wren, Grandmaster USPSA, IDPA, Masterclass Shooter, and owner of KR Training. Good evening, Carl. How are you?
Howdy from Texas. Doing great.
Awesome. We're glad to have you. Folks, Carl's bio. Carl is the lead instructor and director of KR Training. KR Training is a team of 12 instructors that teach on an 88-acre facility in Central Texas and all over the U.S. A trainer since 1991, Carl's credentials include more than 2,500 hours of coursework for more than 60 different trainers and certifications as USPS a Grandmaster, IDPA Master, NRA Training Counselor, Texas License to Carry and Shoot, Texas School Safety Instructor, Masad Ayub Group Deadly Force Instructor, Simunitions Instructor, and Range Master Advanced Instructor. He has been featured on the Outdoors Channel Shooting Gallery Show, magazines such as SWAT Magazine, Gun World Magazine, and Concealed and Carry Magazine, and a great many podcasts that don't matter except ours, and blogs. And his first,
that's why I didn't list them in the bio.
I'm just teasing. I got to throw that in there. We'll get the jabs in where I can. And his first book, Strategies and Standards for Defensive Pistol Training, is now available on Amazon, folks. And I got to make sure I get that link from Carl to put in the show notes before the end of the day. All right, Alan, take it away, brother.
Yeah, Carl, thanks for being with us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I guess first I want to hear about A-Zone Range and how you got that going. We live in a part of the country where it's not the easiest thing in the world to get a range going, and even harder to keep it from going into litigation every couple months. So.
It took a while. Here's what happened. Texas passed concealed carry back in 1995. I started thinking about building my own range about then. I looked into doing an indoor range, and the numbers were pretty big. And a friend of mine suggested, you should just buy land outside of town and do an outdoor range. And we started thinking about it, and the numbers were a lot better. And basically by about 2002, we had enough money to make a down payment. And we spent about a year looking to find a piece of property. This particular place, every time we went out to look at it, we heard neighbors around us shooting, and we took that as a really good sign. And so I think we did good. We ended up, we've got 88 acres of property on the range property itself. We're bordered by 100 and 200 acre properties, and all the neighbors around us like to shoot. So aside from one neighbor we had an early issue with, we got that resolved. We really haven't had any problems. And that's worked out pretty good for us. We're hoping to hang on a few more years. Austin keeps growing and pushing closer and closer. Eventually, they're probably going to show up downrange of us. But for right now, things are good, and we're hoping to keep it open for another decade or more.
What kind of stuff do you have there? What all can you do there?
I've got 3 bays. They're 25 yards deep. One of them's a 270-degree bay that we use mainly as a shoot house bay with movable walls so we can change the floor plan around. I've got one main bay that we can run about 12 people at a time on the firing line, which works for just about all the classes we host. And then I've got a small bay that we use for smaller events and side work and different little small stages. And we have cars out there we can shoot in and out of and through and into. And then I've got 50 yards from the main range, I have a classroom building that has central air, central heat, air conditioning, a kitchen, a bathroom, and even a little efficiency apartment that I can stay in if I want to stay out there before or after class. So it's pretty comfortable. It's not a giant place. It works for the scale of stuff that I do because I teach, we teach 1 or 2 classes every weekend, and we teach maybe, 15 to 20 people maximum at a time. So it's not really set up for hosting big events, but it does, every weekend we got something going on out there.
That's awesome. That's good that you can have a place like that. What is the percentage of your classes? What are the percentage that would you average out? Do you think are newer shooters, beginner? Not necessarily beginners, but newer to training.
We get a lot of people that it's their first real class. The way it works in Texas, there's the carry permit class. And, we get about 120,000 people a year in Texas take that course, but we don't teach very many of them. There's 4,000 CHL instructors in the state. So, you do the math, that's about 30 people per instructor.
Right.
So there's a lot of people teaching that class. Most people, like I did in the talk, I have a talk that I did at TechCon called Beyond the 1%. Only about 1% of those people seek out training beyond the state minimum. But we do our best to get as many of those into class as we can. So we do a lot of classes teaching people to draw for the first time. We do a lot of classes where we clean up their shooting technique. We do a lot of classes where we help people figure out what kind of holster, what kind of gun. So we get those people in, and we do our best to encourage them to come back and take more classes. That's probably our big focus. We have a 40-hour challenge coin program, and we try to get as many of them as we can interested in working their way through the program and getting the equivalent of like a Gunsight 250 class by the time they get through with the whole thing.
Awesome.
Hey, Carl. You just mentioned you're beyond the 1% presentation. I saw that the first year you presented that at TACCon. And I want to thank you for that because it shaped the way I was forming my curriculum with my company. As I took all of the things that you made in that presentation and built those into my framework. And I would like for you to talk a little bit more about the 1% and what other people out there that have instructing businesses, what they can learn from that.
Okay. That all started right after Sandy Hook, because all of a sudden there was no ammo. And 1- and 2-day classes, people weren't coming because they couldn't get the ammo. And that forced us to reevaluate, what can we do with 100 rounds? What can we do with 150 rounds? How low can we get the round count and still do realistic, useful training? We also realized around that time that there's a whole lot more people with 4 hours and $100 than there are with 16 hours and $500. As much as the traveling trainer market, prefers the longer classes because they're more profitable, the average person, when they go to the range, they only shoot 1 or 2 hours. And there's a lot of people on the weekend. They can't give up a whole weekend. They have wives, they have husbands, they have kids, they have other things they want to do. And so we sort of shifted our whole focus over to 4-hour courses where we offer the same kind of material. We just chop it up into smaller pieces and allow people to digest it in smaller chunks that they can afford with their money and their time. And I would say it's been a huge success for us. I can still group those things together when I go on the road. Somebody wants a 1 or a 2-day class from me, I just stick 2 or 3 or 4 of those classes together and it becomes a longer program. But having the option to chop it up has made it a lot more accessible to a lot more people, I think.
Yeah, I've formed my company with a lot of local 1-day classes in the 6 to 8 hour range and trying to stay in the $100 to $125 price range. And I've been seeing very good success with those classes filling up. And then that is growing into demand for 2-day classes that I'll be starting to do on the road, because it's brought customers into the business. And again, I went that route after attending your presentation. So again, thank you.
Well, hopefully it's working for you. That's, I definitely want feedback from anybody that tries my approach. It doesn't work as well for people that travel. Even when I travel, I mostly do 1 and 2-day classes. But, for example, I'm going up to Oregon in September, and I'm going to do a 3-hour evening class at an indoor range. And then I'm going to do some weekend classes. And then I'm going to do another Tuesday evening class at an indoor range. And so having the ability to come in and say, I'll give you 3 good hours, and that's going to capture some people that aren't going to drive an hour from town to get to the outdoor range to do the longer class. I think we have to find ways to reach those people. We can't just offer them one thing. And if we want to get them into training, we've got to find a way to get them, package it in a way that reaches them.
Carl, have you seen an increase in repeat customers based on using those smaller, requiring less time, treasure, effort, all that stuff to get into those smaller blocks of training? Have you seen a higher repeat rate based on more people coming in to those shorter classes?
I think so. The biggest thing that we changed here a couple of years ago was we created that challenge coin program with a clear progression of topics that says take these classes in this order. And people like that structure, and they seem to like the achievement of getting the coin. We established a baseline shooting test that they have to pass, and they have to pass it with higher and higher scores at different points during the curriculum. So at level 1, you pass at 70%. At level 2, you pass at 80%. To get the challenge coin, you have to pass at 90%. It gives people something to work toward. It gives them a goal, gives them structure they can practice to. So I think all around it's worked good. There's people it takes 3 or 4 years for them to get through the whole program, but those are people that, like I said, they're not ever going to do it the other way. That the idea that if we only give them one option, that eventually they'll come around. I just don't believe that's the case.
I think it's awesome that you're giving a challenge coin for actually completing a challenge. I think it's a novel idea for a challenge coin.
Well, That came about because one of the other things I do is I'm an avid student of the history of the evolution of the training business and a handgun technique. One of the other programs that I do, I was on Shooting Gallery on Outdoor Channel. We did a whole episode on the historical stuff, and I do a class that's 4 hours of lecture and 4 hours of shooting where we go through every decade and we shoot all the different drills. Well, one of the things that the guys that created the training business, the Gun Sights and the Chapmans and the Rogerses and all that, they all had achievements. You get your e-ticket at Gun Sights, you get your advanced coin, advanced rating at Rogers. Those mean things. And we decided that we really needed something similar to that denoted some level of achievement so people could say, hey, I went to this school and I graduated at this level. And then if they go to some other school, other trainers can look at our program and say, okay, now I can know what they did. I know what they're able to do.
Right.
That's going to help them when they go to other schools, and it's going to help us with recognition of what we do. So that's something that was relatively new. We should have done it years ago, but we finally came around to it. And we tried to align our test with a lot of the other schools' tests, so it's roughly the same level of achievement.
All right, Carl, you mentioned your historical handgun presentation, and I would like you to talk a little bit about how handgun standards have changed through the years, sort of kind of what the old FBI qualification course looked like to what it changed to over the years to what it is now. And has there been a different perception of what the level of what good is over the years?
In certain areas, you'd be surprised. It's sort of interesting. There was a period before the 30s, the turn of the century, mostly if you look at what the guys over in England were writing, several of the British soldiers that were writing books on handgunning had standards that look more like what we have today than what happened in between. We sort of lost our way, the 30s and 40s and 50s in particular. We got all sidetracked with hip shooting and fast draw and 50 and 60 yard shooting. So, the most difficult standards course that I have in the library of things that I have people shoot is the 1940s FBI qual, the J. Edgar Hoover edition, basically. So you're hip shooting at 7 yards, and then you're shooting prone at 60 yards, using your right hand to work the trigger. And then some of the drills, you have to switch hands and use your left hand to work the trigger. The level of shooting required to pass that particular FBI qual is extremely high. And most people today, honestly, they're dismal at it, because we never practice anything beyond 15 yards, most of us. And only those that are interested in active shooter these days really do much of anything beyond 25 yards. So back in the day, the ability that people had to shoot at distances beyond 15 yards, and they were doing it one-handed with no hearing protection. We draw faster, we hit better inside of, say, 7 yards. Some of the things people can do now are way better than we used to be able to do. But I think it's a shame that we've lost the other piece of it in the process. So it's been interesting. It's been interesting to see there's more reloads, there's more draws, there's more high-speed shooting, but the long-range shooting just continues to disappear. Every year, every updated qual, it's no, we're not doing 50, we're only going to do 25. Oh, we're not going to do 25. Let's just stop at 15.
Yeah, I've seen that just in my career. I've been on 20 years now. And the qualification course we shot when I went through the academy had 6 shots at 25 yards and it had 18 shots at 15 yards. And the current course has 4 shots at 25 and 4 shots at 15. And the current standard is you can completely miss the target 6 times and still be, quote, qualified.
Yep.
That's not the guy I want coming to save me.
Exactly. State of Texas carry permit is the same way. You can miss the B-27 target at 15 yards with all 10 of your required rounds and still pass. And that's a little bit scary, for those that 15 yards is not that far when you pace off distances inside your house. It's not unusual in even an apartment to have the longest shot from the back wall of the bedroom all the way into the kitchen or to the door. Could be 10 or 15 yards. That's not, in my opinion, doesn't qualify as long range in many realistic situations.
Yeah, at Tactical Conference this past weekend, John Hearn was doing a presentation on the New Hall, incident. One of the things he discussed was, being able to tack load 2 rounds in your revolver and close the cylinder to get it back running in an emergency situation. Well, the qualification course that we shot in '99 when I went through the academy included that step. The revolver shooters had to manually load 2 rounds into the revolver, get it back closed, and shoot. It was 2, reload with 2, shoot 2. And they had 12 seconds to do that. And I think that stems from the Newhall incident, because I asked some of the old heads, and that course was around in '77 when they went through the academy. Now, I was carrying an automatic in '99, so I got to shoot 2, do a reload with a 2-round mag and shoot. So it wasn't a challenge. But for the revolver guys, we were still hung up in '99 because there were 2 agencies in my region that still issued the revolver. And so that still was part of the qualification course as late as my career. And, the guys I considered old heads now consider me a young pup still.
Right.
I look at guys that were I was in high school when they were born. And so it's just how slowly some of that stuff just changes over the years.
Well, you look at the pace of change. I mean, I don't want to pick on the FBI necessarily, but they're a data point that, Jeff Cooper and Jack Weaver and all those guys, they started recommending that we put 2 hands on the pistol by the late 60s, and certainly by the mid 70s, they were absolutely firm in their curriculum on it. Well, the FBI didn't switch to the Weaver stance until the 80s, and they didn't switch to isosceles until the 90s, right? And so you look at the lag. I mean, New York City just recently finally retired the revolver as a duty gun. And so the law enforcement, everybody thinks law enforcement and military is the cutting edge, but in reality, they're giant bureaucracies that lag 10 to 20 years behind what happens in the private sector. In certain cases, because they have to wait till things are proven, but also just they move at the speed of government, and that's just inevitable.
We've got a question from Ryan McCann in the chat. He wanted to know what caused the drop off in distance accuracy training.
Well, I think Lee would probably agree that the quality of recruits coming into law enforcement and their background with firearms, and a situation where you need everybody to pass, and when you move the targets back, they miss more, and the scores go down. And so it's the same thing that happened when Texas tried to write the carry permit. And I have to explain this all the time to my carry permit classes. The state standard was not set to answer the question, what skills should you actually have to be well prepared for a gunfight? It's really, what's the absolute minimum we can accept to let you walk around with a gun in public? Well, I think, unfortunately, law enforcement, there's a certain amount of that in there, too. They have to balance between here's where we'd like you to be and here's where we can live with you being. And that standard just, it's a judgment call, and it's going to change every department. I've got multiple police department qual courses for the state of Texas in my library, and some of them are more difficult than others. And I would say there's a span of probably a factor of 2 between the easiest and the hardest. And that's just different flavors, different agencies. So, you want the people to do better. You make the target bigger and you move them closer.
That's comforting.
Wayne Dobbs terms that as no cop left behind.
Yes.
And Tom Givens often points out that the number one injury for a firearms instructor is throwing up their back when lowering the bar.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the civilian side, in your book, Strategies and Standards for Defensive Handgun Training, if you got one handy, it's a good time to hold it up.
I can hold it up. Look at that.
Yeah. But in that book, you speak about minimum competency for defensive pistol. What is that? And kind of give us a rundown on it.
Okay. Well, John Dobb, who's one of my longtime assistant instructors, he and I got into this extended discussion about, okay, what should the standards be? If the state standards aren't good enough, what do people really need to practice, and how good do they need to be? And so the whole middle section of the book is John writing on his thoughts on that. And it's collected with a lot of input from people like Claude Werner and Tom Givens and Masad Ayub and a number of trainers that we think a lot of who've been around a long time, and looking at older programs and different tests and things. So, John kind of came up with a concept, And we built our little test that we use for our program based around a lot of his ideas and my ideas about what do we need to test and what level of skill do people need to be. My thought on it really is that the average person needs to be about 50% of the skill of a USPSA Grandmaster, which isn't impossible. It's not something that's that difficult, and it's not that different than what we've been doing for the last 40 years. Graduate from Gunsight 250, Mag 40, I mean, pick any schools, even the 2-day programs people run, most of them get students up to the 40 to 50% line. Most police academies get their graduates at the end of their initial block of training. They get them up to that level. They can draw from a holster. They can shoot half a second per shot and get hits and can handle the gun reasonably well. That's, we're not recommending anything that is new. We're just trying to put kind of some boundaries on it and explain, okay, do they need to be able to do a 2-second reload, or do they just need to know how to reload properly? Do they need to be able to draw at a certain speed? Do they need to be able to shoot with one hand and in either hand? All those things, we sort of try to prioritize it. Which things are essential, which things are nice to have. John Correa, the active self-protection YouTube guy, John has done a tremendous amount of work looking at all these videos and actually collecting statistics on which skills show up most often. Claude Werner looked at 5 years worth of the armed citizen columns in the NRA, and he made a list of here's all the skills that people actually used. And so we're much more data oriented. It's not just opinion. It's not anecdote. We have enough data points between Tom Gibbons's data set and Claude's work and John Correa's work that and even the historical FBI, analysis of officer involved shootings, we have a pretty good idea of what skills are actually needed. And we just need to use those. We need to use them when we make our training program. Right. In the private sector, we don't have to, we're not limited by bureaucratic standards, bureaucratic limits to make everybody happy. We have the freedom to try to get it right. So we should try to get it right.
Something that's in that middle section of your book, Carl, camping on to what you're talking about now, and a comment that Lee made earlier about what good is, or what is good, what is, you talked about, okay, 50% of USPSA Grandmaster. Can you expound on that a little bit as to what's in that neighborhood, and then what are some of the milestones moving up, and what do those look like?
Well, I mean, to get to 50% of USPSA GM, I mean, the simple basic test is really one we got from Tom Gibbons, and that is at 3 yards, take a step, draw your pistol, and fire 3 rounds in 3 seconds. And if you can hit in the 8-inch circle of an IDPA target, that's probably your in public self-defense shooting. That's going to be the guy at the gas station pump. That's going to be the person that comes up to you in the Walmart parking lot. On the back end of that, can you simply get the gun up and hit that 8-inch circle at 10 or 15 yards if you have to shoot down the hallway, in your home? The speed won't be as critical, but you still have to get the hits. A lot of it comes down to accuracy more than speed. Once you can get the gun out of the holster, most people do okay with shooting fast enough. The challenge is, are they getting the hits? And so the target we use has a little bit smaller scoring angle, because our theory is that if you can get the hits when you're not stressed out, under stress, that zone's going to open up. But if we hold you to high standards, maybe you'll still be getting what John calls acceptable hits. And so, in the book, we've got some different numbers. The fast drill, Todd Green's fast drill is a good one, like a 10-second fast drill, a 10-second El Presidente. Both of those have reloads, and reloads aren't that critical. So something simple like a bill drill, like even like a 4-second bill drill at 7 yards where you shoot it clean, that's 50%. GM is two seconds. So if you can do it in 4 seconds, draw and shoot 6 and get 6 A's at 7 yards in 4 seconds, that's a good baseline skill.
Very attainable.
Yeah, it's the whole thing is you have to assume people are not going to train the way another trainer uses the term gun hobbyist, and he takes some heat for that. But there is a difference between people that do just enough to have their skills under control and people that like to do it and they go do it for fun every weekend. That we need to find that happy zone where there's a standard that the average person can maybe take a refresher class once a year and go to the range once a month and basically keep their skills up at a reasonable, practical, useful level. Once they get that initial training together, then they just need to maintain what they have, and that's probably going to be just fine for them. They don't have to have a 1 second draw from concealment, but it'd be good if they had a 2 second draw at 5 yards and they maintain that annually and they verified that they had it annually. That's not what most people do. Most people, if they get the standard once, I know people that will go to these 40-hour destination vacation type things. They go to Vegas or they go some other place. And they're like, oh, I took my 40-hour class this year. Oh, have you shot since then? No. They'd be better off doing a 4-hour class once a month than doing 40 hours in one thing and then doing nothing for the rest of the year. But that's the way they choose to do it. And that's better than most people if they're doing that.
Right. Before we get too far away from this, there's a question in the chat from Paris Pat. He wants to know, is it really necessary for civilian defense to be able to shoot at 50 yards outside of an active killer scenario?
Well, maybe yes, maybe no. The accuracy involved in hitting at 50, you might need that skill to make an accurate shot at a closer distance. What if you've got someone at the front door that's grabbed someone you care about, they screwed up, they opened the front door, and now you're making the shot down the hallway at 10 yards, and you only have part of that thread, and if you blow it, you yank it a little left, you're going to hit them. Well, could be as hard as hitting a B-27 at 50 yards. So it's not so much about the distance as it is about what the target size is relative to your sights. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think shooting at distance is incredibly important. Aside from the fact of working on that accuracy and being able to make those shots, it's a whole lot easier to diagnose problems with your shooting when you're looking at a target that you shot at 25 yards versus being a 3, 5, 7 yard sniper.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, small targets will expose errors, or long distances will expose errors that close big targets don't. And so, most people do need to put some time in. Is it essential? No. If you read John's section of the book, no. Shooting past 15 yards is probably not essential. Tom Givens had one student involved in shooting that had to take one shot at 20 yards. He made one hit at 20 yards and stopped the fight. So, that's useful. If you can do it, it gives you confidence to act. And confidence is worth a lot, I think. Confidence, confidence gets rid of hesitation. I mean, Lee can talk about this. He's had a number of his officers involved in incidents, and many of them performed very well because of their training. And I have no doubt that the confidence they had from the time they spent on the range certainly carried forward in their ability to handle those situations. Wouldn't you agree, Lee?
Absolutely, I agree. I actually commented on that during one of my presentations this past weekend. I think it's more to do with than just confidence in skill, which played a large part in their success. It had confidence to do with their decision making, and it had confidence to do with that they knew that their administration wasn't going to come headhunting them, that we were going to back their sound decisions. And I think that the lack of hesitation in their part played a tremendous part in their decision making. You can go to the science of that. Bill Lewinsky has a saying that Bill Lewinsky is the head of the Force Science Institute, that an expert has an automatic use of the tool. And what that means is that the expert is not having to devote brain power to the operation of the tool. So therefore, all of their brain power is going to decision making. But Carl, you made an excellent point there just a second ago about you may need to make a more accurate shot up close. When we start talking about distance shooting and shooting these qual courses, it always presumes that we've got a full facing, target that the whole target's visible. But that may not be the case in an actual defensive scenario. We may have a very small window that we have to put a shot into, and instructors that are basically short-circuiting the accuracy requirements and not holding their students to stringent accuracy standards are not helping their students. Do you have anything to say about that?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, watching all the videos, the one wonderful thing about the internet is there's so many videos now of actual incidents. There's very few, once the first few shots in the incident are fired, people start moving, and the availability of targets really decreases. They're often turned, minimized, sideways, in motion. And so after the first few rounds, it becomes a much more difficult problem, even at close range, moving around vehicles. I mean, everybody runs because nobody wants to get shot. And so being able to, number one, get those first few hits and make them effective, then be able to handle what comes next. I think all of that's very important. Skip Gochenauer gave a talk at TACCON this year about the history of the National Tactical Invitational. And one of the things that he talked about that I thought was very fascinating that, still really doesn't get used very much is they spent a lot of time developing a 3D target that you could engage from any angle. And they did a lot of their live fire work in 360-degree berms where you weren't engaging targets that were exactly straight ahead of you at a perfect squared away angle. That's hard to do. Most ranges can't do that. The equipment and honestly, the safe gun handling required of the participants, the way you have to structure that, you can't have 12 people on a firing line doing that. It has to be one at a time, and it's got to be very structured and planned out. But that sort of training is really, really useful.
Yeah, you made an excellent comment there that people start moving because they don't want to get shot. One other thing that people also don't want to have happen is they don't want to get their draw caught up in their shirt.
True.
So meanwhile, just so you know, Justified Defensive Concept said layers upon layers upon layers, and since you don't have access to the chat right now, I said, of Ashton shirts. Anyway, so
everybody at least once somewhere at some time. It's not always when everybody's watching.
Over and over again.
Don't let them see you sweat. But real quick, from the live chat, just for you, Carl, L Power said, first of all, he said, he or she, I'm sorry, I don't know. But they said, thank you for dinner. Let's see, what did they say? Man, my freaking scroll thing got screwed up here now. Where did it say it, Alan? Come on, help me out here.
What's that?
About the dinner thing. I was trying to call that out for him.
Oh, that was
L Powers, right?
Yeah, it was
here it is. Yeah, thanks for joining me at dinner at TACCON Orleans Bistro. And then also that person just ordered your book. Just
wonderful.
Yeah, I put the link in the so
wonderful.
There you go.
We John Dobb and I live 100 miles apart. So trying to get copies, print copies that both of us have signed, we had a limited number, and so actually, as of right now, this one I hold in my hand is the last copy I have in my possession, signed by both of us, and we're strategizing about getting more that are both autographed because people order directly from us can get it autographed by both authors. If you order it off of Amazon, you get the print copy; they're not signed. But the ebook is half the price of the print book. And so if you'd rather have the ebook, by all means, go for it. It is cheaper and you can carry it around a lot easier. So either way, we're happy to have anybody read it, and we're hoping people like it. It's a little bit different material. I've read hundreds of books on shooting, and some of the stuff in our book I don't think anybody's put together before. And so kind of my goal was to try to put something that was evolutionary, but not necessarily revolutionary. I'm not reinventing anything. It's more just kind of putting things together, maybe, and make some reference materials that people can use.
Can you kind of give us a little rundown on, that was one of my questions I was actually going to ask you, on how that book came about? Like what, don't mean this to sound bad, but like, when do you know you're qualified to write a book on a subject? You know what I mean? Like, when do you know that, you know what, I can put this into print, and I'm willing for it to be scrutinized for the next 50 years, and then also a little bit of what people can expect out of it.
Okay. Here's what happened. A couple of years ago, I put together a talk for the tactical conference. I've been presenting training at the Rangemaster Tactical Conference since the early 2000s. I think this was the 21st year, and I think I presented at 17 or 18 of them if I go back and count.
Nice.
So I've been involved with that for a long time. And, you know, honestly, I realized a couple of years ago, most people that presented that thing don't create new presentations every year, but I did. I presented something new almost every year that I did it. A couple of years ago, I put a ridiculous amount of work into making that Beyond the 1% talk, and people really responded to it. They liked it. They wanted more of it. So I wrote it up for the blog as a 10-part blog series. Well, this year, Tom said, you know, why don't you just do the 1% thing again, but you can only have 2 hours instead of 4 this time. So originally what happened was about January, I said, you know, I should put all this together as a handout because I'm not going to be able to cover everything in 2 hours, because I really needed more than 4 hours to do it the first time.
Mm-hmm.
So I put it all together, and then I realized, you know, John had written up all this other material on the minimum competency, and here's 3 other presentations that I put together over the last 5 years that all have good stuff, and some of them were I wanted to expand on and do other things with. So basically, he and I just dived in, and we took our old material plus started writing new material and trying to glue things together and make it flow as a book. So honestly, we put the thing together in the space of about 2 months, mostly archiving, you know, what we already had and thoughts. With all the hard work, all the thinking work was already done. It was just a matter of putting it all together and organizing it and updating it and making sure all the numbers and the facts and chasing down all the attributions of who designed what graph and all that sort of thing to get it all organized to put out. We actually finished it the week and a half before TACCon. I got it live on Amazon. I ordered the books, and they arrived at my hotel room in New Orleans the day before TACCon started. And that's just in time production right there. That's
cool.
I don't want to say it was a rush job. We wouldn't have put it out if we weren't happy with where we were with it, but it was an accelerated timeline, because the whole thing was I was supposed to be writing the historical handgun book that I've been telling people I've been working on for the last 2 years. And, you know, I've got tons of material ready to go for that, but I've also got 30 books on my stack to read that I want to finish before I start writing. And turned out to be a bigger project than I anticipated. This one kind of was a detour on the road, but I think I'm real happy that we put it together and put something out there. So it's projects. I'm big on making big projects that take a while to finish.
Can you kind of expand on that historic handgun class and because I know we touched on it a little bit in the show, but I know when I first saw it, I'm like, dude, you get to go shoot like peacemakers and Colt Navies.
No, we don't. See, that's
what I thought.
I'm going to rename the whole thing. I'm going to rename it to the evolution of handgun technique, because really that's what it is.
Right.
We're not doing cowboy fast draw, although I talk about 1950s cowboy fast draw in the materials. We start about 1930, and I go decade by decade, 1930 to the present, and I talk about the qualification courses, the gear, the major trainers, major publications of each decade, what really happened in the real world, how did that impact training. So it's a history of everything, right, but it's all focused on what changes happened in the gun world. So we talk about what guns came out that decade, what guns were popular, how people train. So, and then each decade in the short version, the one-day version of the class, you shoot a drill from each decade. So we shoot the Army qual from the 30s and the FBI qual from the 40s, and you shoot PPC from the 50s and the Gunsight 250 test and the FBI qual from the 80s and again from the 2000s, and you shoot a few other odds and ends in there from different schools, and those that are super into it, and I have a few students that are really into it, you shoot a 1911 45, then you shoot a double action revolver with no speed loaders, then you shoot a double action revolver with speed loaders, then eventually you get your 1911 back when we get to the 60s and 70s, then you have to shoot a double action single action gun from Weaver, then you get to shoot a striker fired gun from Isosceles, and finally in the 21st century, if you want to shoot, appendix carry with a red dot, you can. So those that bring all the guns in their gun safe get to shoot all the guns that are period correct with the techniques that are period correct, doing it the way they did it back then, except we do wear hearing protection and eye protection for all the drills. And But like even to keep it real, we use a whistle and a stopwatch to time the old courses, and we don't use the electronic timer until the electronic timers actually show up.
So on that vein, Randy Johnson said, "Do you still have your single Ruger single out 6?"
No, Randy is the guy that got me into shooting back in the 80s. So he has a very special place in KR training history. No, I sold that Ruger to buy a 1911 back in the late 80s. Transitioned away from my first pistol that I had was a Ruger single action. It was actually a Blackhawk, and that was where I started, and quickly progressed beyond that. Now I did finally replace it. I do have a couple of Cowboy 6 guns, and still like that kind of stuff, but I don't get to shoot that kind of shooting as much as I'd like to.
But before I let Ashton take this next one, I want to on the historic handgun thing. What drove those changes in training? Was it the criminals? Was it law enforcement being proactive? Was it military? I mean, I know you could probably go on and on about it, but what kind of was the catalyst? Was it different for each?
Really, honestly, it was rebel visionaries and outliers. It was never, innovation has never come from a bureaucracy.
Right.
That's just possible. It just doesn't happen. Bureaucracies suppress innovation. They don't encourage it. So Jelly Bryce was self-taught, showed up and outshot the FBI agents. So they changed the program. Jeff Cooper and Thel Reed and Eldon Carl and Ray Chapman and all those guys, they figured it out there at Big Bear Lake out in the middle of the desert. They figured out what worked and started showing people how to do it. You know, John Shaw and Ray Chapman and John Farnham and Masada Ayub, all those guys that were outside the bureaucracy, they figured it out, and that's what changed things. Bill Rogers went to the FBI in the 80s and brought some guys, and they outshot the FBI instructors, and that forced the FBI to look at it and go, ooh, maybe we should try this Weaver thing now that it's, you know, everybody else has been doing it for 15 years. Maybe we should switch. You know, it's always been motivated people on the outside that question the status quo, that really tried to pay attention. And that's really all the innovations all the way through the whole history of it have always come from the outside.
Nice.
Carl, I'm interested in hearing about your challenge coin and the pieces that build into going into that. So, you know, if I'm a newer shooter, I'm just going to start getting into training, and I decided I'm going to come out to your place. What are the steps that I should expect to see if I want to step through your program?
Okay, we call the class Basic Pistol 2, or now we've retitled it Defensive Pistol Skills Essentials. What it really is if you've owned a gun your whole life, or you think you know how to shoot, but you've never taken a formal pistol class in grip and stance and proper gun handling, we start with that class, and that's really the cleanup class. Does your gun fit your hand? Can you operate it? Can you shoot it good enough to pass the Texas carry permit test? So it's 4 hours of just straight up marksmanship, shooting from the ready position, basic, clean up everything and get you ready for what's going to come next. Then you take the carry permit class, you get your Texas carry permit. Then you come back, and we have 3 classes, defensive 1, 2, and 3. And honestly, what we did was we took the NRA's personal protection outside the home curriculum, which is basically a good curriculum. And we cover all this. If you take all 3 of those courses, which add up to about 15 hours, if you take all 3 of those, we cover all the same topics that the NRA does. It's just, I can't bring myself to teach the material the way the NRA book says to do it. There's enough variation between what I think is right and what they do that I don't give the NRA certificate, but the structure of the course is essentially the same. And so all of that is live fire. Then we add 4 hours of force on force. So there's a 4-hour simunition airsoft-based force on force class that they have to do. There's a low light shooting class they have to do. And then there's a 3-hour red gun scenario course. So they get roughly 7 hours of tactics and 3 hours of low light shooting, plus 30 hours of just plain old, good old pistol live fire, draws, malfunctions, shooting from cover, shooting on the move, drawing your pistol, hitting targets kind of stuff. And so it's basically the same kind of distribution of topics as you would see at a Thunder Ranch or a Gun Sight 250 kind of a classic course. And that's kind of how we structured it. We've got classes that go beyond that, but that's, I mean, people that get through that pretty well covers the spectrum of the shooting and tactics side of it, gives them a flavor of all of it. And certainly then any class they want to take from anybody else, they should have the background to go into it, do pretty well.
Now, where does that put a typical shooter, like your baseline shooter, using your scale of percentage GM? Where would you say that lands them then after that series?
If they can shoot 100% on my 3 seconds or less test, that's basically 50% of GM, or roughly IDPA. I believe it's sharpshooter. It's whatever comes. It's master, expert. I think sharpshooter is the one right below expert. So it's right around in there. It's not awesome. It's a good solid USPSA C class shooter, which is where most USPSA competitors are. That's the largest class. So, they could show up and shoot any IDPA or USPSA match and have safe gun handling and probably finish in the middle of the pack or maybe a little bit higher if they don't make too many mistakes.
Thanks. A class that you have that I was interested in the popularity of it. It's the kind of thing that I kind of geek out on a little bit is your shooting skills, gun cleaning, and maintenance. I think that's great to have a class like that. Is that a popular class, or is it not so popular? How is that received?
Not at all. Really surprised me. It was intended for beginners. It was intended, honestly, for gun culture 2.0 people that didn't grow up around guns, that it wasn't, they didn't go to the range with the family and come home and everybody cleaned guns for the rest of the afternoon. People that bought their first gun that really have no idea how to take it apart or what to do with it. And we see plenty of those people in class. They come from non-gun owning homes, and they go to the gun store and they buy something, and maybe it's the right gun and maybe it's not. But either way, eventually they got to take it apart and clean it. And they nobody to talk to, nobody to help them. A lot of people, they just get on YouTube and they figure it out. And a lot of folks that are mechanically apt, that's the opposite of inept. They do pretty good with that. But there's always people that want a little supervised instruction the first time out. So we just put that class on the schedule occasionally for people that want it. And usually it's the novices that would like to just have somebody there the first time they take their gun all apart and try to put it back together. The nice thing is we do it at my range. So once they put the gun back together, we go out the back door and go back out on the range, and they shoot their gun, and then they leave knowing that the gun actually works after they put it back together, which I think is super important.
I think it's great. I think it's absolutely great.
That is a very phenomenal concept, because from newer students, you do get a lot of questions about, how do I clean this gun?
Yeah.
And spending time on that right from the start in the class, I think is a just phenomenal approach.
And it's handling the gun without the fear, without the anticipation of firing it and stuff like it. It's more touching and handling and having, doing stuff with the gun to be more familiar with it and become more comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, gun novices, once they understand what all the parts do, then they're comfortable with it and they understand how the gun operates. And again, it goes back to confidence, that if you're not sure what button does what, I mean, I've got a lady coming to a basic one, women's only basic one class next weekend. And I was doing phone support for her, like a call center. I was trying to talk her through learning how to dry fire with her pistol and walking her through, here's what all the controls on your gun do, literally over the phone, just pulling up pictures on the internet and say, okay, does your gun look like this? Okay, move your finger up the handle. Okay, that button that pushes in, that's the magazine release, and things like that. And so there's people that need that level of instruction, and they're not bad people because they don't know. They just don't have anybody they can ask and don't have anybody that can show them. And so I think that's important. And shout out to Randy. When I was back down in that situation, he was one of the guys that showed me an awful lot of stuff when I knew nothing. And I've certainly tried to pass that down to others, because I think that's important. A lot of people that might not get into shooting otherwise need that sort of, I call it concierge, right? I'm their customer support line.
Mm-hmm.
So all my students, I tell them the knowledge has a lifetime warranty, so they can always, ping me with questions, and a lot of them do. They'll send me, they'll send me questions. What should I practice? Here's my target. What am I doing wrong? Here's a video. What do I need to do? Here's my, all that sort of thing. So I try to give them a lot of motivation. As long as they're shooting and motivated to keep doing stuff, they're eventually going to show up at another class. I may not make any money off of watching somebody's video for 10 seconds or Instagram or whatever, but if I give them 5 minutes of my time, then they may come back for a class in the future, and things usually work out.
Mm-hmm.
Things work out fine. I don't think anybody's really abused that privilege to any degree that bothers me.
Right.
Carl, John Hearn wants to know about your study into grip strength and how that affects shooting.
It's, I like to do science, and I haven't really done science on it as much as I have just tried to get some information. I started using the Captains of Crush grippers to make my own grip stronger, and I kept running into problems with students trying to do the thumbs forward grip. And generally what happens is with their shooting hand thumb, they're pushing the other hand off the gun. And I discovered many years ago that simply telling them don't do that doesn't work. They're still doing it. And we got wrapped up into why are they doing it and why can't they stop doing it? And what we ended up finding was those with limited grip strength, the gun's jumping around in their hand. To them, like if I go shoot a 44 Magnum, the gun jumps around in my hand. Well, when you shoot the big revolvers, you typically go to a thumb over thumb grip and you don't try to shoot thumbs forward. Well, it turns out that for a lot of people with limited hand strength, if the recoil bothers them to the point that they're pushing down hard with that thumb, having them go back to thumb over thumb, which is not trendy or cool. It's not the way all the cool kids in the YouTube videos shoot. But, that technique has been around for a long time. And what I found is people can get more grip strength on the pistol, and for folks that need that can improve their shooting. I'd rather have them shoot thumb over thumb and have the grip stay the same between shots than try to shoot thumbs forward and end up with a grip that falls apart every other shot. I've taught that to a bunch of the ladies with the A Girl and A Gun organization, and they've been passing that down to their members when their folks need it. And I teach a fair number of older students, a lot of seniors and people with limited mobility. I've got students that walk with a cane that I let them drive all the way up to the range, have the disabled parking right there, and then let them, come out and shoot from a seated position if they have to. The thumbs forward grip doesn't work for everybody. And if you're having problems with your own thumbs forward grip, or you shoot with someone that the support hand keeps coming off the gun, switch it to thumb over thumb and see if that works better for them. I think it's a technique that's been lost to history in our zeal to want to do what the cool kids do.
Very good. Ashton, did you have something?
Actually, that's exactly where I was going based on the conversation Carl and I had on Thursday night before TACCon at dinner. So Carl, when you talk about that thumbs forward grip, and the difference between that and the more traditional thumb over thumb grip, do you think that's purely a hand strength issue, or is some of that technique driven?
Some of it's technique driven. What it comes down to is when you do the thumbs forward grip, all the grip, I'm going to see if I can get my hand up here. All the grip is in the fingers, right? All the grip strength and all the pressure on the gun is from all the fingers. Well, your grip strength this way is less than your grip strength this way. If you have enough grip strength to grip the gun with just your fingers, then you can make thumbs forward work just fine. Most of the top shooters that use that technique, they actually have tons of excess grip strength available to them. So once you get over the threshold of the amount of grip strength necessary to run the gun, then you can do a lot of things. If you're below that threshold and you try to grip it with just the fingers and you only have, say, 40 pounds of grip strength with your fingers, well, that's not enough. You need 60 pounds probably to run a 9mm pistol. And so if you only have 60 with a full, fist crush grip, you better use the full fist to get that grip strength on the pistol. So some of it's gun fit, some of it is grip strength, some of it is technique. But the odds of success for the beginning shooter are probably higher with thumb over thumb, just because it's almost impossible to screw that up, right? You crush the hands together, make two fists, push down as hard as you can, tighten up the grip as much as you can. That's going to work. You're not going to drag your thumbs on the slide. You're not going to hang up in the controls. There's a bunch of stuff you're not going to do, and it gives you the maximum grip on the pistol. Now, do I teach all my students to do that? No, I don't. I teach those that need it. It's real easy. The test we give is real simple. You walk up to the 3-yard line, get rid of the target, point your gun at the backstop, grip the gun as hard as you can, run the trigger 6 times as hard as you can. If your grip falls apart, then your grip technique's no good. If your grip looks the same before and after you fire those 6 rounds, your grip technique's probably okay, and now you can start working on everything else. But if you can't keep a consistent grip for 6 rounds, doesn't matter how cool your grip technique looks when you start. If after 6 rounds it's falling apart, that's a big problem. And so you've got to go back to just baseline fundamentals. I was talking about that with John Farnham, and he and I, it's something he and I agree on, is the consistency matters more than the specifics of technique.
Carl, I think the very first time I ever saw you present was 2 or 3 years ago at the Tactical Conference, when you presented on your red dot sight study. And maybe if you could kind of explain the study and what you found in that study, and does it still hold up now that the red dot sights are becoming much more prevalent? Are you seeing any changes, or have you even studied that? And just a quick anecdote with that: I posted the study in a discussion forum, a Georgia-based forum, when I got back from the Tactical Conference, and you released your article. And one of the first responses was, that study's not valid because he didn't test from 25 yards. And that's specifically what he was not testing. You don't understand the study, sir. So go ahead.
Yeah, I am the famous conservative writer William F. Buckley used to say that his job was to stand athwart history yelling stop, to try to stop the train of history from running. And that's probably my role in all of this, and my results get mischaracterized and maligned against those that have a giant mug of Red Dot Kool-Aid. So here's the background. In the early 90s, I was an IPSC open person. I ran a red dot on my pistol for the entirety of the 1990s as a competitor. So I understand how to shoot a red dot. And that's often it's like, well, if the naysayers, that's usually their first thing is, well, he doesn't understand how to run a red dot. Yeah, I think I do. I'm pretty sure I do, actually. Just to put the icing on the cake, the year that I did the red dot study, I also got the Grandmaster ranking in carry optics with a slide-mounted red dot. Basically, that goal was strictly so that I could refute the naysayers. I put the time in to do that so that would, hopefully blunt some of that criticism. What happened was we had an opportunity to get some funding from Texas A&M, from the Sports Performance Institute there, the Huffines Institute, to do a little study. And we spent some time trying to, and by we, I mean my wife and I. My wife is a PhD in biology who's an excellent researcher. And so originally it was she and I collaborating on this. She's also a shooting competitor, rifle competitor, pistol competitor, training counselor, USPSA shooter, all that stuff. So we designed a study. We tried to collect a statistically valid number of data points. And all we were trying to do was compare ready to first shot, 5 yards, 10 yards, irons, laser, red dot, and red dot plus irons. So there were 4 conditions. And we spent a lot of time trying to design a study that would stand up to academic rigor. That meant a limited number of trials and a limited number of cases, but a lot of data points. What we ended up with was about 118 data points collected over about a year. We provided all the guns and ammo out of our funding. We had no industry sponsorship. We had no donations of equipment. It was strictly unbiased. And as an old red dot shooter, if anything, I had a bias to want to show that the red dot was better. What we found was, for a lot of people, the difficulty in finding the red dot on the initial presentation of the pistol to the target, when we limited them to 1.5 seconds to get your hit. That was a challenge, regardless of who it was, regardless of whether they were novices or experienced. We had USPSA grandmasters, we had instructors, we had Ayub and Givens and every instructor that came through to teach a class at my place, they ran the test and we added them to the data point. So we ended up with a wide range of ages, genders, skill levels, experience levels. It's all there in the write-up on it. That what we found was everything was great as long as you could find the dot. And if you couldn't find the dot, then often the clock ran out before you could get the shot off. And honestly, I really haven't seen that problem get any better. There are more people who are motivated to get better at it. And so you see some people that do quite well at longer distances. No argument, the red dot works better if you look at the data on classifier scores from USPSA, which is convenient because everybody's shooting the same course of fire, and often the reloads, the magazine capacity doesn't matter. It's shooting versus shooting. That at best, they're 5 to 10% better with the carry optics gun than they are with the iron sights. That it's not magic. If you yank the trigger, the dot is not going to fix you yanking the trigger. If it helps you aim the gun better, great. If you, one time out of 10, when you draw the pistol, you can't find the dot, I think that's a warning sign. As a competitor, I only know that I own a skill when I can do it 10 times in a row and not screw it up. And my performance level is whatever the baseline is, right? If I do 10 and I mess one up, well, I only own it to the level that I messed it up. And if your life depends on it and you have a bunch of 1 second draws and then you have a 3 second draw because you drew the gun and you couldn't find the dot, you know, what if that happens to you when it matters, when you don't have 3 seconds? It worries me. And I'd like to see the dots get better. I think long term, we're going to get better. We're going to get better gear. We're going to figure out how to solve that problem. But, right now, I think there's a mad rush of people who want to buy skill with equipment, or they just want to do the new thing because the cool kids are doing it. And there's people out there that are doing nothing but pushing these things because they make money from it. Like was Ross Perot used to say, follow the money. That I got no dollars in this either way. I teach people that have red dots on their guns. I teach people that don't have red dots on their guns. I teach people with appendix carry inside the waistband. Whatever it is, I'll teach you how to shoot it. I've put in time to learn how to shoot it. I can teach you how to do it. But I think most people don't do an honest A/B comparison. Do they shoot better with a dot or not? They just buy it, and then they declare that they shoot better because they spent the money. But they don't ever go back. Since they don't train to a baseline and measure their skill to begin with, it's easy for them to say they shoot better because they didn't have a before and after check it in the first place. So it's that's all I want people to do is think critically, measure your performance, put a dot on your gun, train until you shoot as good or better with the dot, then you got something. Otherwise, all you have is sort of mush. You've just spent a bunch of money and you believe you shoot better, but you don't really know. Does that make sense? It makes me unpopular.
It makes me have the question I have about it is how is that different? Say like a new shooter trying to learn front sight focus, never having done it before. Is it different, or is it the same? Is it for a new shooter trying to figure out front sight focus or the dot? Is that
the problem is if you don't teach them how to use irons,
right?
Number one, any red dot gun that's set up properly is going to have backup irons on it. The data showed that the red dot by itself with no backup irons, which is the way a lot of people cheap out. They take the rear sight off their gun, they put a dot in place of the rear sight, then they have no backup irons. And the argument is, well, I'll just tube it. I'll just line up the window of the dot with the target and hope for the best. Well, in my write-up, we did the math. And if you can't see the dot, your gun is aligned so far off alignment from where it needs to be that unless you're just lucky and you combine a high right misalignment with a low left yank, mechanically, you're not, if you can see the A zone of the target through your window, but you can't see the dot, the gun is so far out of alignment, you're not going to hit the A zone. And so, that's just I'm just going to tube it and I don't need to see the dot up close and all that. A lot of that I think is it's a cop out. It's an excuse. They haven't tested that. They just tell that to themselves as an excuse. And I'm much more a believer in measuring stuff and testing stuff and actually proving it. And so, would I teach a new shooter to shoot a red dot? It depends. the average person that carries a pistol thinks that anything bigger than a Ruger LCP is too big and too heavy, and they couldn't possibly carry it. And if they could find something smaller, they would. And so then when you tell them, the average person, not the gun hobbyist, the average person balks at spending $400 on a pistol, God forbid spending $50 on a holster, and a spare magazine. What kind of crazy talk is that? Who carries a spare magazine? So now you're going to tell them, oh, well, now you need to have your $400 pistol milled for a $700 red dot sight that's going to be the same size as the gun, and that's what you need to carry. That's great for the super motivated people, but the reality is the majority of folks, what they need is a gun they're going to carry with them. Like Claude Werner says, and Tom Gibbons says, the first thing you got to do is have a gun with you. And if you keep raising the bar and say, oh, well, your Ruger LCP or your Snub-Nose 38 or your Kel-Tec whatever, that's not good enough, that you've got to triple the investment you've got in hardware. I think all that's a non-starter. It's all great if your market is selling gear to gun hobbyists who will, pay you $500 for a weekend class, who can dump, all the money in the world on all the specialized stuff. But for the general 99%, I think it's not accessible. It's not affordable yet. It's not easy enough that the average person that's going to shoot 3 times a year can put a red dot on their gun and should go out and carry that as their primary gun, given that if they can't find the dot, they could very well just stand there and hunt for the dot until it's too late. And that worries me a great deal.
Gotcha.
That's what I tell people. If you're not going to work at it, if you're not going to measure your skill, if you're not going to put the time in to get better, if you're not going to put the time in to make sure you can actually use this thing, then, I'm not saying don't try it. I have students that have done it that do quite well with it, but it's not for everybody.
Hey, Ashton, you want to get that question in the chat, and then I'll start wrapping up?
Yeah. Real quick, before I do that, Carl, you said something about gear as far as being able to do it 10 out of 10 times, right, with your carry gear.
Well, any gear.
Right. And then you talked about owning a skill. You had to be able to do it 10 out of 10 times. Is that the same? And it sounds like it is. Is that the same for competition? Because you mentioned competition specifically. Would you call that
That's right.
competition?
Yeah, that's where I learned it. Actually, I learned that practicing for the Steel Challenge. That Steel Challenge, there's only 8 courses of fire, and you shoot them and shoot them and shoot them and shoot them and shoot them. And it's real easy to get deluded into thinking that your match day performance is going to be your best run repeated over and over again, even though you've never done 4 perfect, light speed runs in practice, never mind expecting to do it on match day. Learning how to take your practice runs and estimate what you're going to do on match day. That's where I learned that Shoot and Steel Challenge, because what I learned was you take 4 of your worst runs in practice and you add those up, and that's the most accurate predictor of how you're going to do on match day. And even the top shooters, even when they're breaking into the low 70s on the match, many of them will say they can shoot in the high 50s or the low 60s in practice, and even they are not shooting up to their maximum potential on match day because of the pressure of competition. And so, that's the top shooters. They're shooting 120% of what Grandmaster measurement is in USPSA. And on a good day in practice, they can get some YouTube runs down that are truly impressive. Being able to do that on match day, that requires a level of consistency beyond just hitting a few good runs for the camera. And there are guys that can do it. There are some amazing shooters that are way better than I am. The amount of effort it takes for them to get there and maintain that level is significant. And that goes back to that minimum competency. It's like, goes back to, let's set a bar that's our cold standard. You get out of the car and you shoot 10 rounds on a drill, and that's what you have. One of my classes in my coin program, that's what we do. They get out of the car, they walk to the line, we run them through a test, and we score the test, and this is what you have. This is what you're going to have at the gas station tomorrow night when you need to draw your pistol. This is the skill that you have. That's the measurement of it. And, that's got to be careful about looking at your peak times and your best runs and your video runs and your Instagram runs and saying, oh, that's how it's going to go for real. I don't think that's how it's going to go. It's going to be as good as your worst run. If you're lucky, it's going to be as good as your worst run, and it might be worse.
Okay,
All
the
right.
question from chat
Okay.
is it important for an instructor to be willing to be consistently available for more high maintenance students? And Ryan's asking because he considers himself a high maintenance student.
He is.
Oh boy, that's up to the instructor. That's up to how much time you have and how many students you have and how much of that sort of thing you're willing to do. At the moment, my bandwidth, the people asking for it, I can manage it. That's not true for everyone. So that's all going to be, your mileage may vary. I know that to put in a plug for a friend of mine, Ben Steger, has started this thing called the Practical Shooting Training Group. And you can pay, I think it's $100 a month, and you send them videos and they give you assignments. And it's like a much more structured personal coaching kind of thing. Mike Seeklander, I know, does some things like that too. There's probably a number of the top, full-time guys that do nothing but shoot that offer that kind of training. I think at some point, if somebody starts asking for more than the instructor's willing to do for free, they'll let you know. It just depends on how much time they have and what they're willing to do. That answer is going to change. It might even change during the season. During the winter, might have more time. During the summer, could be busy. That's you have to work that out with whoever it is you're going to start bothering all the time.
So this is where I asked you, Carl, to let everybody know where they can get a hold of you. Anything that you want to let everybody know you have going on or anything like that, and all that stuff.
Well, that's easy. It's krtraining.com. The blog is blog.krtraining.com, and I post a lot of stuff there. And I've got classes every weekend in Central Texas. Then I'm going on the road. Lee Weems is hosting me at his place. It's October. Lee is coming to my range in June to teach some classes.
Nice.
I have Todd Ayub coming. I have Tom Givens coming. I have going on the road to teach in Oregon. Gabe White is hosting me in September. Marty Hayes is hosting me in September. Then I'm hosting Gabe in October, but that's sold out with a long wait list, so don't ask. We'll start taking names for his 2020 visit, I assume, at some point. But that's kind of what. Oh, I'm going to be at Paulapalooza teaching the historical handgun. I'm going to be at the Girl in a Gun conference in April teaching there, and I don't know what else. A lot. Lee's coming to my place in May for the Rangemaster Instructor Reunion, where he will be teaching, and I will be teaching, and Tom Givens will be teaching. So I got a lot going on.
Nice. Ashton? Ashton? What do you got coming up? Where can people get a hold of you?
You can find me real easily on Facebook, 360 Performance Shooting and 360performanceshooting.com. Coming up this week, I've got concealed carry pistol here in Pennsylvania. In April, I'll be with Tim Chandler down at FBF training doing shotgun skills.
Y'all gonna bring some of those sweet shirts?
In May,
I heard good things about your session, by the way. I'm sorry I missed it. That was at TACCON. I heard a lot.
Say again, please. I didn't hear.
Oh, I was just complimenting you. I heard good things about your shotgun session, your training session you did at TACCON. People seem to have a good time with that. Sorry, I was teaching myself in a different place.
Oh, thanks. I did hear you. I just wanted to hear you say it again.
That's all right. That's all right.
I'm kidding. In May, I've got defensive pistol skills and competition pistol skills up here in Pennsylvania, and again back down at FBF with Tim doing home defense shotgun. And then in August, we've got our 2-day. Tim and I are teaching my shotgun 360 2-day program, and so it got a pretty busy year for a part-timer.
Cool. Lee.
Well, Carl was nice enough to cover part of my upcoming schedule. April the 7th, I have 2 spots remaining in a critical pistol skills class here in Georgia. It's going to be at the Red Hill Range up in Martin, Georgia. April 25th, I've got a Standing Your Ground, which is my legal presentation class in Stone Mountain, Georgia. That's a Thursday night. June 1st, I will be in Glasgow, Kentucky, with a combined legal pistol course and my legal block and a pistol block all combined in one day. And then back in June, I'll be in Kennesaw, Georgia at the Complete Combatant with upcoming guest Brian Hill, teaching my Standing Your Ground block again. And then October the 12th, I'll be up in y'all's neck of the woods there at Culpeper, Virginia, with my debut of Applied Pistol Craft, 2-day pistol class.
Okay, Carl, you got to do our rapid fire.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you 9 questions. These answers are for you, not necessarily what you would suggest for someone else, but your preferences. 9 or 45?
9.
Striker fire, double action, or single action only?
Striker.
Appendix or strong side hip?
I carry strong side.
In the home, pistol, rifle, or shotgun?
Probably I would go to pistol first.
Use of timer in training, yes or no?
Absolutely.
Red dot or irons?
For the moment, irons. But I'm hoping the red dots are going to come along, and eventually I expect we'll all be using them.
Cool. Favorite shooting drill?
Can I claim my own drill? My 3 seconds or less test. We spend a ton of time designing it. I use it a lot.
Yes. 3 books that you recommend that are must reads. They don't necessarily have to be shooting related.
Okay. I would go with the new Masad Ayub book. And of course, now that you put me on the spot, I can't remember the name of it. It's the one that has John Hearn's chapter in it and Craig Douglas's chapter in it. It's the most recent one from Moss. It's a great book. And then I would go with Brian Enos' Practical Shooting Beyond Fundamentals, and I would go with Ben Steger's Skills and Drills. Dry Fire Reloaded. Not Skills and Drills. Dry Fire Reloaded. And
please recommend one peer, teacher, trainer, coach, or instructor. Nobody on the panel.
I would have to. I'm gonna name Ben Steger as my guy. He's the guy that got me to Grandmaster. I think he's doing some really good work, and most of the tactical defensive people probably aren't aware of all the stuff that he's doing, and they're missing out. He's got some great material and a lot of great insight into how to teach that they ought to go check out.
Nice.
Well, Carl, if you could give us a referral, we'd love to have him as a guest on our show.
I can do that.
Awesome. Thank you. And Alan, you forgot question number 10, open carry or concealed carry. Anyway, to become a corporate sponsor or to advertise on the show, please send an email to baraka3@gmail.com for details. Please share, subscribe, and leave your feedback by commenting at the bottom of this YouTube video or leave us a review on iTunes. Please hit the alert bell icon when you subscribe so you know when we go live. And folks, please give us a thumbs up. That'll help the algorithm on YouTube push the video to get more views and share the knowledge with more other people. Check our website is on Firearms Radio Network. It's firearmsradiotv.com/civilian radio. Just look for Civilian Carry Radio and then put Firearms Radio TV and you'll see it. We're on Twitter at CC_Radio2A. On Instagram, please give us a follow at CC_Radio2A. Our Facebook page is just, again, CC Radio 2A. All of our audio podcasts are listed below. We are on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Podbean, on Speaker, on Player FM. And folks, I will be getting that show produced tomorrow morning, and it should be up before noon. Again, folks, we appreciate all the people who pledge. Your support helps us continue the goal of educating people on the importance of the Second Amendment, firearms, education, training, proper mindset. And please check out also our show notes for various industry partners discounts from Aridus Industries. As we were talking about the red dots, ATI for all your milling work is CCR ATI 10, gives you 10% off slide work. I've got my new Aimpoint Acro P1 on order, and we'll be shipping it over to Mr. Douglas Holloway and his wife Nina to get it put on a new slide. So check them out. Battle Comp, Big Tex Outdoors, of course, Dark Angel Medical. We have a 10% off discount there and 15% off code there. Fire Clean, Trident Concepts, and Tough Products. Please join us next Wednesday, March the 27th, for our 87th episode where we feature Mr. Brian Hill, 4th degree black belt in karate and Japanese jiu-jitsu, 3rd degree black belt in taekwondo, and owner of Complete and Combatant. And from the reports we've heard at TACONA, one hell of a shooter. The following episode, the week after that, is our 88th episode. That is Mr. Scotty Banks, U.S. Marine vet, training manager at Glock of Glock Incorporated. And then we have retired U.S. Marine Lieutenant Colonel Freddie Blish, owner of Robar Guns, after that. And our 90th episode is Dave Boone Benton from Threat Management Solutions. Our 91st is Dave Shaw, U.S. Marine Infantry Unit leader, vet, and Shaw, owner of Shaw Industries. 92nd is Dave Spalding, LEO, and owner of Gun Combatants, returns to our show. 93rd will be Mr. Tim Herring, USPSA masterclass shooter with wrong-handed and wrong gun, aka 9/11 of Tim Herring shooting. He'll be on the show. 94th episode, we have Miss Vicky Farnham of DTI Women will be here. We had her husband John Farnham on the show previously, so we're looking forward to welcoming his lovely wife. Our 95th episode will be Mr. Mike Pannone, U.S. Marine Recon, Army Special Forces, Green Beret, first SOF Delta Force vet, and USPSA Masterclass shooter, owner of CT Solutions. And then our 96th episode is John Doc Spears. Also, folks, there's a couple of gaps in between. I mean, we're always basically 3.5 months booked out, but two people I'm really excited about also that we have booked and confirmed. John Murphy was from FPF Training, was our very first guest, and he will be returning for our 100th episode. Subsequent to him, our 99th episode, I booked Mr. Caleb Causey today, owner of director of training of Lone Star Medics. And then our 101st will be Mr. Chuck Pressburg. And then we also just booked for June 5th, Mr. Tim Kennedy, U.S. Army vet, Green Beret, Special Operations Forces, and co-owner of Ranger Up.
And UFC fighter.
Yes, that's right. He is. I forgot. Didn't he beat Michael Brisbane and Machida, right? I don't remember. All right, Alan, final thoughts.
I think it's great. You come very well respected by your peers, and I think it's really awesome that you're still doing a lot of work with newer shooters. I think we lose a lot of. I don't guess I should say lose, but a lot of instructors end up doing going with their students and going to where they're doing more higher level stuff. And I think it's really important that we have guys that are still offering those entry level classes. And people in your area are very fortunate to be able to start their training journey with somebody like yourself.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Kathy Jackson was another great trainer. Kathy once commented that the beginning students really need the best instructors. Teaching beginners is the hardest. It's real easy just to call drills and blow a whistle and do the easy stuff and just tell people to shoot faster and stop missing. But dealing with those fundamental problems at the end, those are the most stressful classes we do. Those are the ones we work the hardest to teach. And that's a thing that people that really know what they're doing, they should not step away from teaching those low-level classes because it matters.
It's a bigger responsibility too, I feel.
It's just hard to do. If you're a traveling trainer, again, those people aren't spending $500 for a 16-hour class. They're just not ready for that.
Right.
Amen. Folks, I also forgot to mention, please also check our show notes for Carl's bio, his link to his Facebook page, his Instagram, his website, and also his books. Please make sure you go and if you can, take a look at his book on Amazon. Please follow him on Instagram, check out and like his Facebook page and follow that. Ashton, final thoughts, brother.
I've been listening to Carl's presentations at TACCON for years now, and I tell you what, if you have the opportunity to train with Carl and you don't show up and take a notebook, you're making a big mistake. He's one of the smartest guys in the room, and it doesn't matter what kind of room he's in.
Nice. Huge accolades there. Mr. Lee.
Well, one event that I left out that is upcoming is an event called the Mingle, and I did that on purpose to do this show teaser for next week. The Mingle is organized by Brian Hill's wife. So whoever the guest hosts are next week, be sure to ask Brian about the Mingle. It's a great event. That's your teaser for next week's show.
Well, can I ask you, Lee, would you mind being a guest co-host next week?
Sure.
All right. And Carl, Ashton, would you guys like to rejoin? You don't have to. No pressure. Just throwing it out there. I know you guys
are available. I will do that.
Okay. Because we got Brian Hill next week. Ashton?
Yeah, great.
Yeah, you know what? I'm
down.
down.
Mingle last year. We're in again this year.
All right, perfect.
The next thing I wanted to say, I sent Baraka and Alan an email about it this earlier in the week. In January, I attended a class as a student, and another student ran up to me in the class and said, "Hey, I know you. I've seen you on CCR. That's the cool acronym for the show out there." In March, I went to a different class, beginning of March, as a student, and the same thing happened. One of the other students says, "I'm walking up with my range bag, comes run up, hey, I've seen you on CCR." All right, well, this weekend at Tactical Conference, one of the other attendees, Jason Armstrong, came up to me and he says, "I want you to pass a message along to Baraka and Alan, and I'm going to embarrass you two live on your own show here for a second." And he said, "Please thank them for what they're doing out there with the show and getting all of these people in front of the audience that's out there." Because Jason wanted to point out that most of the presenters at TacCon have also been guests on the show. And he's like, "Wow, I get to listen. I get to come here and see all these people in person that I've already heard an hour and a half to talk with them on CCR." And so great job, guys, bringing that out. Ryan McCann was there this weekend, and he was walking around like all wide-eyed. It's like, I'm seeing all these people that I've heard. And so, again, great job, guys, for what you're doing and everything that you're bringing to the industry. And then finally, my favorite thing about Carl is a lot of people talk about what they think they can do. Carl's got a measuring stick for what you can do. There's no guesswork when you ask Carl a question. There is no guesswork in his answer. He will open up a book to page 47 and show you the chart and break out a slide rule and show you exactly how he came to his answer. So when he gives you an answer, it's not made up, folks. It's not guessed at. It is scientifically valid. And I very much appreciate that about Carl.
Well, awesome. In the book, we have some of the secret formulas, so you can do your own measuring now.
That's why I have you, Carl. I don't need to do that. I've got you.
All right. Well, listen, Carl, we leave the final thought to our guests, so let me say my spiel. Lee, we are really honored. Alan, we're super humbled by that. I mean, we do this because we want to give back, because it's something we're passionate about. It's important to us. And we thank you. I mean, and folks out there that have come up to Lee and said that, we really appreciate each and every one of you guys and all of you. We've gotten tremendous response via email, and tons of the trainers, instructors, coaches and teachers we've had on the show have told us you guys are proactive. When you listen to and you hear people on the show, you write us and you let us know, hey, I went and trained with these people. Keep them coming, because you guys are doing exactly what we're trying to do, is give back, so that more and more people go out there, regardless of their agenda. They're becoming better and safer people to be able to be situational aware, so they don't fall prey and become victims to predators. And that's what's most important to us. We don't want to see any more good people lost because they weren't prepared for a violent encounter or situation, or they were too busy having rose-colored glasses on, thinking that the world is pure vanilla. And unfortunately, it's not. You don't have to be scared, just well prepared. And with that, I leave the last and final thought to our good friend Carl here.
Well, I think I'll close with something I tell my students, and that is, there are a whole generation of trainers that have been doing this a long time, that created most of the material that the rest of us teach. And rather even than train with me, I would tell your listeners, the guys that are in their 60s or in some cases their 70s, they're not going to be around forever. They have tremendous knowledge, and there's a generation that is fading away on us. And if you have to choose on your training dollars, I would tell you, seek out some of the guys from the greatest generation of the trainers and learn from them while you're still around and still available to learn from. Because some of us younger guys will be around a few more years, and you can catch up with us, next year, the year after. But don't wait on some of the big names in the industry that may be on their final tours or their final few years. Dave Spalding, Tom Givens, Ayub, Farnham, Hackathorn, Bill Rogers. There's a bunch of names. I'm sure I'm leaving people out. But all those guys, there's tremendous knowledge there, and take advantage of it while it's still available.
Well said, and amen. And I just want to thank each and every one of you guys, Alan, Ashton, Carl, Lee, for your time. Folks, again, just do us a favor. if you see folks, let them know, spread the word, pass the episode around, and follow these guys. I mean, they're out here doing this work because their hearts are into it and it means something. It's their way of giving back to our society. And, you know, this show will be here long and gone, you know, when we're long and gone, hopefully still educating people, kind of like a historical archive. At least that's my hope. So God bless you guys all tonight. Be safe, stay vigilant, and take care. Thank you.